Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled you're here. And today we're going to talk about something that might be on your mind really heavily, or at least running in the background, which is what can I be doing in order to prepare for a potential recession or downturn? We're hearing from all the economists, or most of the economists, that there will most likely be a recession or at least a downturn in the economy. And so the question that you may be considering as a business owner is how to prepare for that. So that is what we're focused on today, how to recession ready your consulting business. And I'm going to share with you a lot of very tangible strategies and tips, both from my own experience running my consulting business, my coaching business, and also a software business startup during recession times, and what I've learned from that experience, what I've helped clients take away from those experiences, so that you can apply those to your own business and make sure that you're just putting yourself into the best possible scenario where you're actually able to turn this into an advantage, a competitive advantage for yourself, versus something that needs to be creating fear, stress, and worry. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, because you've been through recessions before, I'm sure, but it may not have been while you're running your own business. So there's that added layer of responsibility. And I want to make sure that you've got a really good playbook to put in place, doing the work now to put yourself into a really good position as we, move into uncertain economic times. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, how to recession ready your consulting business. As I mentioned, I'll be sharing a lot of practical advice with you, along with the critical success factor that you might not have thought of in order to help you avoid sabotaging yourself and your business. So that is our focus. Let's talk about the agenda for today. So the agenda for today, we're focused on recession readying your business. I titled it that way on purpose. You may see a lot of things about recession proofing. I don't even know what recession proofing means, but certainly there's no magic bullet to avoid the impacts of a recession at a macro level, but certainly we can make our business ready for a recession and really position it in such a way that, like I said, it can turn into an advantage for you versus something you just have to weather. So with that, let's talk about the three key areas we're going to focus on today. The first is I'm going to share with you three different, very specific practicalities that you want to focus in on, double down on in your consulting business, so that you can basically get your house in order. You maybe have been avoiding some of these, knowing that you need to do them just generally. And so today I'll share with you what those are in three different categories and give you hopefully some motivation to prioritize this work so that you've got a really stable foundation from which to run your business when and if rocky times in the economy start getting a little bit crazier, right? They are a little bit crazy at the moment, but if we start hitting into a specific recession. So then number two, after we talk about those business practicalities, those three business practicalities, then I'm going to share with you specific strategies you can use to turn this recession or this downturn into an opportunity for you and your business. So we're going to focus on that as the second topic today. And then finally, we'll wrap up with that. What is that critical success factor that I mentioned to you? What is the critical success factor for you to recession ready your business? So stay tuned till the end, because that's an incredibly important piece of this formula. Okay, but before we get started, I just wanted to share with you, I created an assessment. It's called the Independent Consultant Business Recession Assessment. So I've been doing these assessments and getting a lot of great feedback about how in-depth the results are and how they really help you to prioritize and figure out what's going to move the needle the most in your consulting business. So I made a new one for you. It's called the Independent Consulting Business Recession Assessment. And it's going to walk you through really the 5 pillars that you want to be looking at in terms of your business and ensuring it's in a really good place as we start potentially moving into a recession or at least a downturn. So you'll want to make sure that you've looked at these 5 pillars, you know where your business is relative to these 5 pillars. And it's really critical to take a look at that so that you have enough lead time to make sure your business is thriving in those areas and strong in those areas. So again, you're ready for this recession. So that's my gift to you. A great way to put what we're doing into practice in your business. So make sure you go and take that recession assessment. It is at the URL IC, so the letters IC assessment.com. All right. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well. So with that, let's dive into getting your house in order. So we want to focus on these 3 key areas that I mentioned for you to really get your house in order as a business owner and to really make sure that these best practices are in place. Because honestly, these are not anything that you haven't heard before and things that are probably on your to-do list. They just haven't bubbled up in terms of the priority. You've probably been focused on client delivery. And if you're like a lot of consultants, potentially kind of kicking the can down the road, as they say, on some of these areas. But it's really important now that you put a plan in place. It doesn't have to be all at once, but put a plan in place to tackle these 3 key areas that I'm about to share with you so that you've got them in order and you've got a really strong foundation when and if we hit an official recession or a downturn. This is what's going to be emphasized if you don't have it and potentially lead you into more struggle than is necessary or any struggle that's necessary. So with that being said, here are the 3 key areas. Visibility. The first is you've got to get your visibility systems in place for your business. And so that means visibility into your financials. I don't like dealing with that whole side of the business. It's not fun. It's not exciting. It's not creative. It's not anything. You may be in the same place or it's just something you avoid. So get yourself into a routine where you are looking at those financials on at least a monthly basis. You know exactly where you stand financially, and you're saving the right amount of money for taxes. You're saving the right amount of money for what I call a reserve. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And you've really got a good command on those financials. If you don't want to do it yourself, then hire a bookkeeper. That's what I've done. I have a bookkeeper / fractional CFO, and we meet every single month. And I do it because it's on my calendar and I pay him. So I make sure that it happens. If I was left to my own devices doing this, I know I wouldn't. So I've set up that amount of accountability for myself and outsourcing to make sure that it happens. So for you, if you don't have a good financial system in place and you don't want to do it yourself, or you just have to look in the mirror and say, you know what, I'm not going to do it myself, I've been thinking I should for a really long time, then go get yourself a bookkeeper or a fractional CFO. Make sure you have really good line of sight into your financials so that you can make decisions based on the real data versus your guesses about where your business is at. Secondarily, your pipeline. So making sure that you have your system set up from a visibility perspective to know what's in your pipeline. It shouldn't be in your head, and it definitely doesn't need to be into some sexy system unless you want one, like a CRM, or it can literally be in Excel or in a task management system. It doesn't have to be fancy, but what it does need to be in is something where you're tracking it. You know exactly what's in your pipeline. You know the value of what's in your pipeline based on some probability. And then you know essentially what results you could expect in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months based on those metrics. So get that in place if you don't have it yet. And the third area is your receivables. Talk to so many of you who have a lot of receivables outstanding, and you're trying to figure out the best time to ask your client for the money that is overdue. The best time is now. Now you ask for the money that's overdue, assuming that they owe it and they haven't paid it yet. You've got to have some of those challenging conversations. And it's not about you, it's about you running a business, and separating yourself from that is really, really important. So the first part of getting your business house in order is creating those visibility systems. The second aspect of getting your business house in order is on your financials. So in your financials, let's talk about really three key strategies you can implement. I already touched on one, which is once you get the visibility into the receivables, go get them caught up. Create a strategy, do the thing that feels uncomfortable, figure out how you're going to collect all of those outstanding receivables, and stop avoiding the topic because it feels weird. And then you insert yourself into it. They're paying you for your work, and all of that mental drama I know happens for so many of us. You've got to get into a different mindset, which is I'm a business owner. I've done this work and want to make sure that my clients are caught up on their receivables, because as we move into a potential recession, look, you've been on the business side. I'm sure you've worked in corporate, and you know what happens. Someone in finance or the C-suite or wherever decides we need to cut costs. We need to increase our cash on hand, whatever the goals are. And one of the first things that happens is renegotiating. And there's nothing off limits. Clients can come to you and renegotiate the receivables that they haven't yet paid. They can come to you and renegotiate the contracts that you've already signed. Really, I've seen it all. Even asking for money back from vendors, which was not amazing, but certainly happens. So put yourself in a really strong position where you've got the cash in your bank and you don't have to worry about potential clients coming to you trying to renegotiate or not pay or that kind of thing. And certainly if at least you can have a conversation about it and make a plan. If they can't pay it all right now, getting a really solid plan in place so that you both know what to expect and how the money will be paid out. So that's the first part of getting your financial side of your business house in order. The next component that you're going to want to look at are your expenses. And this is a very important balance, because sometimes I see consultants going to one extreme, which is I'm going to cut out every expense I possibly can. I want to basically hoard money for the winter in this case being the recession or downturn. And so I'm just going to really buckle up, right? And you've got to be really careful, because as a business owner, you don't want to cut off the expenses, all of the expenses, with that kind of a blanket statement in your mind. You want to really think about your expenses and say, you know what, I've been considering, for example, going to a conference. Your inclination could be, you know what, I'm not going to spend the money to fly. I'm not going to spend the money on this travel. It's not worth it right now. I should really focus and prioritize on keeping my cash. But at the same time, you're potentially leaving opportunity on the table to create new relationships, to advance your pipeline, especially if this is something that you do once or twice a year and it really fills up your pipeline for the next 12 to 18 months. It's really critical that you take a second thought about whether or not you cancel something like that. This is using a scalpel, not a axe, right? We don't want to just go axing off all the expenses and hunker down. We want to really just use a scalpel with the expenses to figure out what's going to make the most sense from an investment perspective and a return on investment, which quite frankly is something you probably should be, if you're not, thinking about already. This just, again, highlights and enhances that internal dialogue for yourself. You might decide on the other end of the spectrum, you know what? I was planning to update my website, for example, but I don't have a very specific return on investment for that. It's just something that I know needs to be done. It's a little bit dated. You may decide to put that on the back burner as a business owner, not out of fear, but out of really looking at your expenses and upcoming expenses and saying, you know what, my return on investment here is maybe it's not going to make as much sense right now. So I'm going to put that on hold. So think about your expenses and what the return on investment is for those, and just give them a double check. Just because you decided you're going to pursue a new website doesn't mean that you have to proceed forward with that. You can revisit your plans, and that this is a great time to do that. And then I touched on this a moment ago, but this is the time, if you haven't already, to ensure you have a reserve in your business. By reserve, I mean cash on hand that will support your operating expenses as a business, including, when I say operating expenses, in that way, I'm including whatever your owner draw or however you look at that. You might look at it as your salary. You want to have a reserve in your bank account of 3 to 6 months, depending on what your philosophy is, so that you are able to pay yourself if you don't have client work. So many times, and this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, so I'm not going to go too far down this rabbit hole because I've talked about it before and I know I'll talk about it again. But a lot of times we think that the money our client is paying us is our paycheck. The amount of money that's coming into our business is somehow our paycheck. It isn't your paycheck. It's money that's coming into your business from which you pay yourself, from which you pay your taxes, from which you operate your business. If you're not saving money for those types of things, then you're really just creating a glorified paycheck for yourself, which is not why you're here. So think about this. How could you start building up? If you don't have a reserve, then what does it need to look like in order for you to start building that back up again? As a side note, this is a really helpful thing to be talking about with your bookkeeper or your fractional CFO if you get one of those on a monthly basis. What does that reserve look like? What is the projection of the reserve in the next quarter? Like really thinking about that. Okay, so that is the financial of getting your business house in order. And now let's talk about the getting your house in order from a business development perspective. This is incredibly important, and you might have been avoiding it. You need a business development process for a business. How do you attract new potential clients all the way through onboarding a new client and all the steps in between? Do you have that really dialed in so that you understand the metrics? And we've talked about this in prior episodes. I'll put a couple of links in the show notes about how to create metrics around this process. But essentially, you're going to want to make sure that you've got that pipeline in order, that it's actually set up and tracked somewhere, Excel, like I said, or a task management system, or if you want something sexier, you can use Pipedrive. The key here is really getting this in place, your pipeline. And what that means is thinking about not only the visibility, which we've talked about a minute ago, but also thinking about what does it mean with a potential recession or a potential downturn to the way that I look at my pipeline. So you may consider, you know what, I might start including the recession as another element in my probability calculation. So for you, for example, you might have historical data or even a hypothesis that your close rate is around 50%. And so you may consider, you know what, during this recession period of time, during a downturn, maybe I want to look at that and say it's 30%, just to give myself a little more buffer. Once you get the visibility into your pipeline, think about the mechanics of your pipeline. And then how do you want to approach a potential recession, a potential downturn when you think about operating that pipeline? You might also want to just increase the number of flows into the pipeline because of this, potential downturn or recession. So think about it and really look at the numbers and make a purposeful decision so that you're not just making decisions for your business by default or off of fear. This could be a time where, look, I'm going to call you out right now. If you're like most consultants, we don't love business development. If you're like most consultants, you prioritize working in your business over working on your business. And you just are not carving out the time, even though you know you want to and you need to, you're not carving out the time to work on your business in the way that would be ideal. This is the time to do that. Double down on your pipeline creating activities and routines. Get yourself into a routine. This doesn't have to be monumental and perfected and perfect and 8 hours a week type of work. This means carving out 30 minutes, carving out an hour, wherever you're at in the evolution of your business. Let's walk it, not run, and get a routine in place for yourself so you know exactly what it looks like to create a pipeline, push clients through the pipeline, and get them to a decision on the other end, one way or the other. This is not the time to be putting this off, which again, this is nothing new. This is something you know already, but now we're putting some highlight on it because of a potential recession. This is great. Let's doubling down and getting those mechanics in place. What also you want to be thinking about as you get your business house in order from a business development perspective are what are the areas that really are important to invest in, as you work on your business. So things like relationships, getting back into touch with people that are in your network already, whether they have a direct potential as a client or know people who could potentially be a client, or you literally have no idea if they have a potential impact to your business or not, but it's just doing that work every week to maintain and cultivate and add to your network. What can you do to be helping them? It doesn't have to be billable work, it has to be work that's focused on deepening and maintaining those relationships. In some ways, they've been hard to maintain over COVID. So just double down on that. You may also want to invest in speaking and name recognition in this time and standing out as a thought leader for your own clients and helping them, like I'm doing with you today, starting to talk to them about what's they're thinking about for the recession. What is their approach? What might help them kind of get out of the weeds themselves, like we're doing here, and think about things from a bigger picture perspective versus just executing against a plan that they had made last fall probably or last winter, and they're just executing heads down and sometimes not taking that moment to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. So the last piece here in terms of getting your business house in order is really refocusing, rededicating yourself to your business development processes. This is a great time to do it. Okay, let's focus in on the second topic here today, which is how to turn a potential recession into an opportunity for your business. So this doesn't have to be something we're running away from. We can actually run toward it. And so I want to share with you just a little bit of a personal perspective on this, because the last couple of big recessions, which were in 2001, I think the dot-com bubble burst, and then also in 2008, 2009, when the housing bubble collapsed and the financial markets. Those are the last two longer lasting recessions. There was a short one, and if you look at the history, which I did right before this, there was officially a short recession with COVID, but it was only 2 months. So if we focus on those bigger recessions, I just wanted to share with you a very personal perspective on this, because I think it's really helpful for you to get into the mindset of what your consulting service buyers might be thinking when they're hitting times like this. So let me just tell you what I'm talking about. When I was in corporate, I basically was the partner, a co-founder in a SaaS software company. It happened to start in 1999. So it started just a year or two before that very first recession, the dot-com bubble. And we survived as an early stage company. We survived through that particular recession. I'll touch on how we did that here in a moment. And then we survived again through and thrived, quite frankly, in the housing bubble recession in 2008, 2009. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is really from two perspectives, helping to navigate a early stage SaaS software company through those types of economic conditions. I learned so much that is informing what I'm sharing with you here today. And second, and how we turned that into an opportunity for our business versus something that was a detriment. And then secondarily, I want to share this with you because very specifically, the software that we built for the company was centered around, still out there, helps companies manage, like Fortune 1000 companies, manage their use of outside contractors and consultants. So if you can imagine, across the globe, we had hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe even close to a little bit over $1 billion in contractor and consulting fees going through our system. So we had so much access to the data about buying trends, especially in the 2008, 2009 recession, because all of that data was going through our system. So we could look and see at a micro level, but also on a macro level, what is happening here when a recession happens, and buying trends from companies, very well-known names you would recognize, as well as smaller companies that might be more niche. What are they spending in terms of contractor and consulting work? And by far, what we found in those recessions is that companies ended up increasing their use of contractors and consultants during a recession because they still needed to get the work done. They still needed to deliver for their own clients. They still needed to protect and increase their market share. They still needed to continue operating and making money, but they also had so many goals around cost containment and that kind of thing. And usually one of the biggest areas is about employees and money spent on employees. And that's oftentimes something that's so visible, right? And so what we would find is that companies would potentially lay off a lot of people, unfortunately, and then they would just replace most of them with contractors or consultants. Because a lot of times, to be honest with you, and I'm sure you've experienced this, HR doesn't need to get involved with those types of quote unquote purchases of contracting and contractors and consultants. They just get involved with it full-time employees. So there's different types of approvals that are needed and that sort of thing. So I share all of this with you from the perspective of seeing what happens from a very specific data-driven approach here, which is how companies tend to react in these types of situations based on the data that was flowing through that software that I helped to build and manage the teams to build. And then also, as a side note here, creating and operating a startup through those two really big recessions, to the dot-com and the housing bubble, and figuring out how to become more nimble, how to essentially turn what we were doing into a differentiator for our clients. And so that's what I'm going to share with you next, is really how do you create and direct the dialogue that you're having with your clients to show them that you're adding value in this potential recession, in this potential downturn, and really using this to your advantage where you're going toward it versus trying to shirk away from it. So this is an opportunity for you very specifically to start thinking about what could be your new consulting offers that you want to start offering to your new or existing clients. What might you extend on your existing consulting offers that are related to potential recession/downturn? What might you add on? So think about what you're doing right now as a consultant, and then think about how does that get impacted to what you're offering to your clients. So you could start thinking about, well, I'm going to look at strategic planning and start offering some advisory type services. You might start thinking about, how do I infuse cost reduction into what I'm doing with my clients, or increasing their profitability? How do I help them increase the productivity of their existing team? So it's one of two things. You may choose to augment your consulting offers, add new ones, even very specific to recession and downturn issues that your specific clients are facing. And you may also consider just repackaging what you're already doing with that specific focus in mind. So it's really just you looking at what's happening in the industry, as you always do, and taking that into account. In a lot of ways, that's not even something that's necessarily super special here. But why it is special is that you're really going toward this topic and not avoiding it because it's kind of scary for you operating a business. The other thing that I want to share with you is this could also be a really important time for you to consider teaming more seriously. There are other consultants who don't want to worry about business development, especially when the conditions get a little rockier. Build relationships with those other consultants that you may want to bring on if you've got a teaming approach, in your business plan, and start building out the pipeline for that virtual bench. This is a great time to do it. Okay, the last topic for today is that critical success factor I've been promising you. So the critical success factor is your CEO, is your business owner mindset. This is the time for you to double down on you thinking about yourself as a business owner, not as a consultant who's delivering services and might have an LLC. You're thinking about yourself as a business owner, and how are you going to operate your business in this particular scenario that may be coming up. This is the time for you to be very cognizant of where your mindset is at and your self-identity is at, being a business owner and a CEO, so that you can operate off of confidence and certainty versus fear and panic, so that you can operate out of being in control versus feeling at the mercy of the external circumstances. I cannot emphasize enough as to how important this is for you. And so this is going to be an area that sometimes it feels a little bit less tangible versus like go work on your business development pipeline, or let's revisit your offer. A lot of times business mindset can feel a little bit less tangible. So today I want to share with you 7 key questions that you can ask yourself to really take the temperature of where you're at from a mindset perspective and identify your areas of opportunity in this particular critical success factor. Because as you can imagine, operating your business off of fear and panic versus confidence and certainty is going to give you 2 wildly different results. And that's why this is so important. As you can imagine, feeling in control versus at the mercy of your external circumstances is going to give you such a different result in your business, in the pipeline, in the quality of clients you're attracting, in the amount of control you have over the revenue and profitability and the capacity from which you're delivering. So that's why this is so important. We'll put these 7 questions in the show notes, but I'm also going to give them to you here now. The first is, how can a downturn or a recession be an advantage for you? Number 2, how can you be more nimble in what you offer and deliver? Number 3, in what ways can you increase your impact for your own business and for your clients? Number 4, what do you need to be thinking about in order to feel more confident and in command? Number 5, what do you need to stop thinking that's creating this fear or panic? Number 6, is there an opportunity to add or adjust to your offerings like we were talking about? What are the opportunities for you to add or adjust to your offerings? And the last one is, how can you stand out as a thought leader by getting in front of this particular topic? So those are 7 key questions. That's just a little sliver of what I've created for you in the IC Business Recession Assessment. And so you want to go take that as well. Plus, it will ask you these questions so you don't have to go write them down yourself and answer them. You can just go online. It will ask you the questions. You can answer them. And then it will give you a report, will give you the priorities of what to address in your business in prioritized order, along with more resources for you to go make it happen as easily as possible. I love giving you a jump start. So be sure to go take that IC Business Recession Assessment and get yourself a playbook for starting to get ready for a potential recession or downturn. So that's what I've got for you today. Go put what I've shared with you into action. And if you want more help refining your business operating plan and your systems and the way you're thinking about your business in order to increase your profitability, in order to increase the joy that you've got as you're running your business and reduce the overwhelm and stress, be sure to reach out. I've got availability on my calendar. I think it opens up again in the next couple of weeks if you're listening to this in the real time. And so let's talk about whether you would be a good fit for private coaching. I would love to help you if you're at a spot in your business where you've been wanting to put all of this into place, but just haven't made the traction or the progress that you thought you would. So let's talk. And you can go to consultmelissa.com. My name has 1 S in it. melisa.com, and grab a spot on my calendar. All right. Great to be with you again this week, and I will see you again next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.